Shocking.
What is,
It looks like it's working.
what is the it that was not working?
The connection between Zoom and Restream wasn't working yesterday, and today it looks like it's working.
Good news.
2 pieces of software. All right, I think we're on already. Expecting a few other people, but they'll come when they're ready. Here goes.
The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this. I think it's Tuesday. And we've got another Q&A today. We did one a couple of days ago. Today we've got a number of our supporters here, and we're going to do it the way we always do it. Go around the people who are live, take their questions, and then jump over to the Super Chat and take questions in the Super Chat. So Super Chat is open, is available for all you guys to participate in. So I hope you brought your checkbooks. And let's see, yesterday I gave a talk. I'm hoping to have the video in the next few days so I can begin up. It wasn't a talk, it was an interview. Somebody kind of sad, somebody interviewed me at an event that happens every Monday here in Puerto Rico. It's called Crypto Monday. It's the crypto community of Puerto Rico all comes together, and there were about 65, 70 people there, and it was a lot of fun. And I got to talk a little bit about, about Atlas Shrugged, about value, about money, about the meaning of money, and then talked a little bit about Bitcoin. And I think a lot of you will find the Bitcoin stuff at least interesting. Bitcoin guys still have a hard time answering my questions. So answering
was Spencer Schiff there?
Peter Schiff. No.
Oh, Spencer. We don't want Peter.
Which one's Spencer?
His son. They've been going at it on Twitter back and forth.
Oh no, I don't know. Is Spencer in Puerto Rico? I don't know if Spencer's in Puerto Rico.
Oh, I don't know what the deal is, but on social media they go at it back and forth.
Wow. Okay. Well, there are a lot of real passionate crypto. There's some people who've made a lot of money on Bitcoin at the event last night. So yeah, and Puerto Rico's become this hub where a lot of the kind of the crypto Bitcoin people are coming. I think with the hopes that they can avoid paying taxes on their massive cryptocurrency profits. But we will see if that pans out. All right, so I'll have that video as soon as we get it. I'll have that video. It was great. A lot of people there. Ayn Rand fans, a lot of people who follow the show knew who I was, people I'd never met before, and it was actually a lot of fun. So we'll have that up soon. All right, so let's start with Nick. Hey, Nick.
Just give me a second.
Sure.
I wanted since I knew John Ridpath a little bit.
Yeah.
I took his Western Civilization course way back. I just wanted to pass on some wisdom in his memory. And by the way, is there going to be any sort of at ARA any kind of a page? It's a shame there's so many young objectivists who don't even know who he is.
Yeah, there's going to be a number of things that they're going to do. First, they're going to put out the 1984 debate with a new production of the new version of the 84 debate under the Institute. They're also going to make a page where they're going to link to the e-store, is different courses on the e-store and on campus.
Okay, no, he's got, he didn't write any books, but he had a lot. He wasn't as smart as you, where you got a co-author.
I had a co-author. It's not me, my co-author.
So no, but he had a lot of video. There's a lot of video out there. I mean, I saw one in 2010 where he did it with the Tea Party, but I guess his health was declining after that, and
that's up on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, Unfortunately, he had Alzheimer's late in life in the last few years, so He really struggled in the last, I'd say, 5-6 years or so.
Okay, so let me tell you the story.
Yeah.
So he in his course, there was this honors student that that Leo Panitch. You've debated Leo Panitch, the Marxist, had gotten to first.
Yep.
So he took his course. He was an honors student, and he told me, he goes, you know, I had him 3 times a week for a year. You know, I'd point out contradiction after contradiction after contradiction. He says, you know, we'd go through this, you know, he'd try to justify things by going through this Hegelian dialectic process where, you know, there's a thesis and antithesis, and, you know, contradictions are just natural. He said after a year, he goes, I didn't even make a dent.
Yeah.
Not a dent. Now, no, you know, it just, and it's, you know, from whence he told me the story, it's true today. I mean, I'm sure you've run into
Absolutely.
students.
I mean, it's not about making a dent in the professor. He might have inspired some other people in the classroom, and
No,
certainly,
but with the student, he didn't make a dent.
yep.
This is a 20-year-old kid.
Yeah. Some people you never have an influence. But we know that John had a huge impact on many of his other students, right? We know a
No
number
question about it.
of his students who became objectivists and quite prominent in the movement and very active. So yeah, John had a profound impact. But yes, some students, it doesn't matter. No matter what you say, no matter the contradictions, because their views are not held rationally. They're not held with some connection to reality. When you show them the connection is not there, they go, oh, I see, because it's not connected to begin with. It's all floating anyway.
A is non-A.
Yes, they start with A is non-A, so nothing you can say is going to matter. And that's, yeah, at some point, there's certain people you just have to give up on. There's just no point. It really is a waste of time.
Yeah, that's what.
And knowing when to give up is hard. It's very hard.
Did you know that Brian Mulroney was the Prime Minister of Canada for 8 years? He heard him talk at the Conservative Convention once.
Yeah.
And he was blown away by him. You know,
Yep.
he gave a speech on why businessmen should act on principle and not compromise.
Yep.
So he invited him to be a speechwriter.
Oh, wow.
So he was a speechwriter for a while. Then somebody double-crossed him.
Okay.
Part of the speechwriting crew. So Brian Mulroney, the Prime Minister, would call him at his office at York University, and he wouldn't answer the phone. He dug his heels. I just thought I'd tell you another story.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, John was terrific. He gave a great speech. He got very emotional, which I think often added to the speech. It added to the kind of the effect it had on the audience. He told a great story. He turned particularly his stories about the founding fathers became almost theater to watch John deliver those speeches. I don't think you can get quite the full effect on audio, but you get a big of the effect of the audio. I mean, watching him live was really quite, and he had this amazing booming voice, and he had a real charismatic presence. I mean,
he'd take the whole stage. He would take the whole stage. I mean, Absolutely. He had stage presence.
Absolutely.
So he passed on the baton to you.
Well,
have you given down the line? I know you're just starting. Have you given any thought on who might follow in your footsteps?
My hope is that dozens of people follow in my footsteps.
But you got to have somebody. You got to groom.
I mean,
you're the preeminent speaker right now for objectivism. There's no one else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not the preeminent speaker for objectivism, because I think you need to be a philosopher for that.
No. In terms of representing, everybody looks to you.
Yeah, I mean,
and you're just getting started.
There's nobody. I really do hope that there are a lot, right? That in the next 20 years, there's just going to be 2-3 dozen people that we look to in terms of speaking intelligently and in an interesting way to large audiences, because it has to. That's what it's going to take to have a cultural impact. It's going to take numbers, quality and numbers, right?
Well, hopefully you give it some thought, and you.
Well,
when you see talent out there.
I mean, Alex, I kind of discovered Alex and Alex Epstein, right? And it wasn't just me, Encore, others, helped develop Alex. Don Watkins is certainly, I'm pretty happy with the work Don Watkins is doing. He's a really good writer. So he's not going to be on stage maybe, although I think he's a good speaker, but he's primarily a writer. And there'll be others. They're coming down the pipe.
Wonderful.
Good. Thanks, Nick.
No problem.
Adam, you sent me a question. Do you want me to go over that, or do you want to ask something different?
Yes, I do want you to go over the question.
Okay, so this is the one on GDP per capita, right?
On the right way of computing what GDP should compute but doesn't.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to read this. I'm going to read what Adam wrote, and I'll comment. I've repeatedly heard you use the GDP per capita as measure of productivity. My question is whether an individualist can come up with a better measure of the productivity that matters to the individual. The productivity that matters to the individual is how much he personally produces and can spend. So I would propose the following measure: GDP minus government spending, divided by population, times the cost of, divided by population times the cost of living, all in parentheses, right? It would be necessary to crunch the four numbers to a spreadsheet, but they're not difficult to obtain. That's all true. A cost of living table is a little tricky. What cost of living really is, I think. Okay, so I'll comment on this in a minute. The numerator seems pretty obvious. Whatever is spent by government is not available to individuals. I would use the cost of living in the denominator because the cost of living eventually reflects every instance of statism other than spending, from regulations and cronyism to corruption and subsidies, tariffs, etc. Because of a partial, okay. Yeah, so I think this is definitely in the right direction. So I think this is all, this is all the right approach to take, although again, it suffers from kind of the problem that all kind of these aggregate measures have, in that it's an average, right? It's an average for an individual. It's not the productivity of an individual. It's just an average for the entire population. But here's some of the challenges. Even minus government spending, GDP is not a very good number because a GDP does not include a lot of productive activity that actually happens in the economy. There's actually a better measure now than GDP that the government is actually reporting, only for the last few years, but it's a better measure. It's something like gross output. So it counts all spending, business spending across the entire supply chain. GDP only counts spending at the end of the supply chain. So in a sense, consumer spending, right at the end. But all the business stuff, me buying the parts to put together, to then that isn't counted. So you need a broader measure of private sector activity. And then you need the gross output is also includes government spending. So yes, you have to subtract government spending. I think that's good. The other challenge I think you have here is cost of living. That's a tricky number. I think it's a good proxy. The kind of you refer to the World Data Info Cost of Living Index. It's as good as I know that exists. I don't know of anything better than that. And it is something that people use to adjust even GDP per capita based on different countries. You could, yes. So I think if you use the gross product, took out government spending, so that's the net productive activity reflected in dollars that occurs in the economy, divided by the number of people adjusted for how much it costs them to live, right? In a sense, the requirements they have to spend. And that would give you an average. It's not a measure of productivity. It would give you an average, and it's not exactly wealth. Yeah, it's closer to wealth than productivity, I think, Adam. Because I think productivity.
Okay, let me give you my argument why it measures as productivity. For me as an individual, to be productive is to promote my own life. Okay, so I'm trying to measure how well people in that country can promote their own individual lives, because this is what it means for me as an individual to be productive in my own life.
So I see. Okay, so yes, I think it captures that. Now that's not the way we typically use productivity in an economic sense, but in a moral sense, that's right. This is productiveness. It's what I do in order to promote my own life. Yeah, so this is in a sense the wealth available to me in promoting my own life.
And that, I think, is what really matters, and what I would like to see is people like you, people who know economics and know morality, to put the two together. And I think that's the direction that I would like to see economics go in.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that that's a direction it needs to go in. And I think the key here is that it needs to go in a direction of measuring individual well-being, different measures of individual well-being. I don't think there's necessarily one, rather than looking at aggregates. We have way too much aggregation in economics and evaluate anything on an aggregated level. And we need to return to the idea that there is no such thing in a sense as macroeconomics. Everything is micro. Everything is the individual. Everything is about individual productivity, individual entrepreneurship, and individual well-being and individual progress within the individual's life. And unfortunately, the neoclassical economists took us in the direction of looking at data and looking at aggregation and looking at aggregates of data. So yes, I like that.
There's one more thing I'd like to add to that, and that is because life is the standard of value that we use, and time is the amount of my life, so that how much time I actually devote to any given one of my values measures the value to me rather than the market value.
Yes.
This is something that has been missing from economics and is very badly needed.
That is interesting. Yes. I mean, I often say when I do my lectures, I tell people, when I talk about the virtual productiveness, I talk about its importance. And I say, how do I know, for most people, the work that they do is the most important activity they engage in life. And how do you know that? Important activity for them? Well, it's where they devote most of their time. People say the most important thing is their family, but they don't devote anywhere near as much time to their family as they do to their work. Maybe that's an indication of the fact that their work is a greater value to them than other aspects of their life. So yeah, time generally is something economists don't know how to deal with. So I think, and values, of course, is something they don't really know how to deal with.
And this is one place where I think current advances in data science can really make a difference, because we now have the mathematical and computer methods for looking at individuals. And if Google or Amazon wants to advertise something, they want to appeal to your values. And what do? They try to find out how much time you spend on those values, so they know how important they are to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So
yeah,
this is where the market is already ahead of academia by miles.
Yep. No, absolutely. because the market the market has to existentially has to make money, right? And they know what makes their money. But that's a really good observation. I like that. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Good. James.
What's up, Yaron? How are you?
Good.
Good. A little more on the structure of philosophy. Just kind of been going through it. I'm always going through this for myself just to kind of verify it with reality. So, you know, like so if you start at metaphysics and epistemology, you know, so you have like kind of your basic axioms. So you have those things. You have the kind of the nature of consciousness, volition is in there, concepts is in there. Getting from, you know, once you're at that point, getting from there to like, you know, what Adam just mentioned, like life is the standard of value. I know one of the things is, like the issue of the metaphysical nature of man comes in there. I guess, how do you like thinking about getting from concept formation, you know, in the sense that it's not in here 100%. It's not out there like the universal theory. It's the relationship between the two because of the nature of consciousness. Getting from, you know, once you've built up to there, tying that together to then get to like objectively life is the standard. I don't know. I mean, this is a little more of an abstract kind of question, but I don't know. Kind of maybe chew that a little bit, or
I could
know what I'm
try.
saying?
You're taking me out of my depths, but I mean, you're constantly asking questions, right? Philosophy is not a chain of deductions.
Right. It's all related. You've got to relate it to reality.
You've got to relate it to reality, and then you've got to ask questions related to reality. So, okay, so we've got to the point where we can form concepts. We understand what forming concepts is.
Yep.
We understand that that's how we know things, that it is, you know, as Leonard says, you know, it's our basic means of survival, right? It's our basic means of survival. And so we know that. But then the question is, what's this all for? Right? Why? You know, why do I have this mechanism? What's the purpose in a sense, right? And that's when you start getting into the normative questions, right? That's where you get into morality. That's where you question, what is all this for? What is reason for? Who reasons? I reason, but what's the purpose of that? Well, and what facilitates it? What makes that possible? Well, what makes it possible is my life, the fact that I'm alive. What should I live for? Well, now you get into the metaethics. You know, what should I live for? Why am I alive? These are the kind of questions that metaethics. Well, I'm forming these concepts because I'm trying to attain values. But wait a minute, what are values? Where do values come from? What the hell is this value thing? Is I act to, you know, things I act to gain or keep, but why do I act to gain and keep them? And why are some things it's good to act to gain and keep, and other things are not so good to act to, by what standard, by what criteria? And you start going, some aid my survival and other don't. And then you have to ask the question, well, why is survival important? Well, because that's the prerequisite to even having all of this. So it's going that rabbit hole, it's going down that chain of thinking, you know. What is the purpose of all this? What, you know, as existentialists would say, why am I here? Right? That's the existentialist, but the way they put it. But what is the purpose of what is the purpose of all this thinking, concept formation? What valuing, and then what are values? And then that, I mean, Ayn Rand starts with asking the question, and then because I'm a thinking being. So here's another aspect of this. Because I'm a thinking being, I know I don't know, right? I know I don't know what I need to do. It's not coded. So how should I decide between option A and option B? By what standard should I decide between option A and B? That is why I need morality. I need morality so I can choose between A and B. Well, what is morality? It's a system of values. But what are values? You know, and values that, you know, and why should I act again? Okay, well, because survival is the purpose. And so you go by that. So the one of the things that is, so here's the thing, I'm making this up as I go along, right?
No, it's good.
One of the things about reason is that it offers you options. It offers you choices. It offers you alternatives. And what's the fundamental alternative? When you
Like-
boil all those alternatives down, what's the fundamental one? To exist or not to exist.
Yep.
And then you go from there. So reason, once you have reason, you then start thinking about, well, what does reason do? It allows me to choose by what standard? Now I have to use reason to discover the standard.
So kind of like the opposite of the Platonic like knowledge for knowledge as an end in itself, to contemplate that, like that kind of thing. It's seeing it as, okay, the kind of almost getting to like the moral and the practical notion of like the having the knowledge allows me to do things, and so then it becomes, what should I do? And that's
It's not even an issue of, it's do things, but even what knowledge should I pursue?
Sure.
The point is that knowledge, once you have reason, you have choices. Once you can focus your mind, the question is what to focus your mind on, where and how long, and you know, because you have free will, you have this. And the realization is, and this is the whole point of reason as man's basic means of survival, I don't know what to do genetically. It's not an instinct. There's no instinct telling me what to do.
Determinism, yeah.
And my emotions are not, so as soon as my instinct, I have no instincts. I'm different from other animals. I have this reasoning capacity to make choices, but I still don't know. I still haven't discovered the standard for making those choices. So it's not an issue of, I mean, the issue of practicality comes in because the standard is survival, and survival is practical and moral, but they're all, that's the unity of practicality and morality. But it's to make decisions, I need a standard, and that requires morality, and morality requires this basic alternative between life and non-life.
Sure. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so the thing to really avoid in thinking is chains of deductions.
The rationalism.
Yeah, and part of the way to get around that is to ask questions that are relevant to life, relevant to reality, relative to what am I do with this, right? What's the purpose? So it's not just a chain that leads down there. Afterwards, you could see that there are deductive relationships, obviously, because they all integrated. But it's about, well, okay, so I have this reason, I have all this knowledge, I have all this information, I have the capacity to make choices, but what's the standard? I think that's the bottom line. All right, Roy.
Hey there.
Hi.
Okay. Some weeks back, I think this was an answer to a question on your show that someone had asked. You said that all sculpture has to be of something, has to be representational,
Yep.
as opposed to some form. So I was thinking about that. So then I examined it, and I'd like to relate it to what's generally called the decorative arts.
Yep.
And then tie that in with architecture. So bear with me for a minute or two, and then I'll say, what do you think of all this at the end? Okay. The decorative arts include functional objects like furniture, vases, and utilitarian objects that are designed for beauty as well as for function. And it also extends to objects that one might have around the home or on a wall that serve no purpose other than to be beautiful, to be appealing. So, for example, even a Mondrian, which is, even though it's not a plastic art, a Mondrian painting, while I wouldn't consider it in any way fine art, can be very attractive. And in a restaurant, on a white wall, a Mondrian or that sort of thing could be very attractive. Okay. And I think that these objects, both functional and non-functional, evoke emotions. So for example, and they also convey a sense of life. If they're good, I'm not even forget about if they're good. The design and the form and the texture, the way they're put together convey a sense of life. For example, you can take the extravagant lushness of Art Nouveau design, and then the more sedate elegance of Art Deco. They say something. They say something about either an orderly life or an imaginative, creative life. And I'm getting goosebumps now again, because they do evoke emotions.
Yep.
And I suspect there's a parallel between the way that works and the effect music has. Because certain sequences of notes will evoke very often the same emotion in anyone, because there's something about that sequence of notes that does it, or a certain chord. It's a minor chord, it sounds sad, or okay. Now, as I recall from my early readings of Ayn Rand, she considered architecture one of the fine arts, but a special one of the fine arts because it's utilitarian.
Yep.
I would maintain that architecture is a decorative art because, like furniture, it's utilitarian. And also, like furniture, it can serve its purpose with great beauty and imagination and a sense of life. And it could convey rationality, an orderly, rational sense of life. Or, as if you see, most decorative arts try for beauty and attractiveness, sometimes for novelty. And some of it is intentionally ugly. And that's also a sense of life. So, also by my final observation, by extension, some, let's say, decorative objects can be quite large and might generally be called sculpture. And it uses a combination of size, form, texture, and color to actually convey emotions and sense of life. So I would say that the decorative arts, which is probably healthier today than the fine arts, just because they're not as subject to irrational and bad philosophy. I think they should still be respected as arts, and a sculpture that conveys all of these things is worthy, and it just shouldn't be considered fine art, but another form of art, decorative arts. I will now shut up. And,
So I think it's important. I think the differentiation between art and maybe decorative arts is important. And therefore, I think that the differentiation between sculpture, which is a category within art, is different than a decorative three-dimensional piece. I don't think you should use the same terminology. And I think that I'm also decorative art that doesn't have a utilitarian purpose is, I mean, I'm trying to think of what that would look like. I mean, yeah, it can have some aesthetic quality to it. I don't think it conveys that much. And I think most of what is being conveyed is, so I don't think it conveys that much. It conveys some. And certainly you could say it's beautiful, just like photography can be beautiful, just like nature can be beautiful. And one can respond in a sense of life way to nature, even though nature doesn't have a sense of life in and of itself. So I think there's something different. And the something different is that there is no real essentialized recreation of reality that allows us to see the artist's metaphysical value judgments. What we see about the artist are certain aesthetic choices that they make that might relate to their sense of life, might relate to their craft, might relate to a number of different things. But I don't know that you can clearly link it to to a sense of life in and of itself without content. And what the decorative arts don't have really is content. And I don't know that, I think Ayn Rand, if she said that architecture was art, the same as literature, and which I don't think she did. I think she always categorized it as different, right? I think architecture is decorative art. I don't think it's full-fledged art in the sense of literature or sculpture or painting. So, I mean, there's research and there's thinking that needs to be done about what makes certain things beautiful and what is it that we respond to in something that's beautiful versus not beautiful. And what's the difference between beautiful? If something's a beautiful, I don't know, ashtray or beautiful, Ayn Rand used to like these balls of glass, and she liked them in a particular color, like this greenish blue, right, which is her favorite color. And she has these. Leonard Peikoff still has these in his house. Some of them owned by Ayn Rand, some of them that he purchased. And they're pretty, they're decorative, but they don't evoke the kind of response a sculpture does. And they don't evoke the kind of, they certainly evoke an emotion, because that's partially how we respond to beautiful things and things we find is beautiful. I think part of it is the objectivity of it. I don't know that we have that it's as objective to say this particular shape pleases me versus to say this novel is a great novel. I think there's much more subjective or individual values associated with decorative art than there is with art. But I might be wrong there. I mean, it's an interesting question. But yes, I think that all of this it certainly does convey something important about your values and about how you see the world. I love modern furniture. I love clean lines. I love rounded furniture that is kind of rounded and very clean and very kind of slick. And while I appreciate furniture that's got a lot of texture and carvings and patterns and all that, it would drive me nuts if I had that in my house. It would drive me crazy. Other people like that, and I don't know that I can say, it's not like them liking really bad art, right? It's that it reflects something different about their aesthetic. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done about this and to analyze this and to think it through. And again, Romantic Manifesto is just a beginning of a treatment of art that is completely original and completely new. And there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And part of that work needs to separate art from decorative art. And of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with music, but I think music is a different category. I think it falls clearly on the fine arts side, and it's not on the side of the decorative arts.
Yeah, but I agree with you.
Except for elevator music.
Yeah, right. No, I agree, but elevator design is decorative arts. No, I agree with you completely that the decorative arts that I love are different from the fine arts. I mean, the statue of David, I just was like, I dissolved when I saw it.
Yeah.
I haven't quite dissolved at a piece of decorative art.
No. But decorative is important, right? You want to live surrounded by furniture you like. You want to live, and I wouldn't put up on a wall a Mondrian, right? Even at a restaurant, I wouldn't. I think it's a cop-out. I think it's a way not to make a statement. Right, because it's pretty, but it's not saying anything. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't convey anything, and people generally, even a lot of people I know who don't like modern art but don't want to commit themselves, they'll put up bland things like paintings of flowers that can be beautiful, but things that are, my house is full of nudes, right? So. I'm making a statement about the world and about life and about.
Damn right.
Right? Damn right.
Just one little thing. Marianne Suarez gave a lecture, obviously decades and decades ago, about art, of course. It was down in Silver Springs, as I recall. And I loved it, but she began by saying modern art can be divided into two schools, the neat, and she put up a slide of a Mondrian, or the messy, and she put up a Jackson Pollock. And with that, she dismissed modern art. And I just love that.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, and the neat has a certain aesthetic to it, and the messy has no redeeming virtues.
Exactly.
And but even the neat, it's only when it's used for practical purposes, like a beautiful ashtray, a beautiful vase, or something that's just on the side, like a little ball or something decorative like that. But when it's hung on the wall as this is art, that's when it's offensive. Even the neat, I find offensive.
Well, thanks.
Sure. All right, Jonathan.
I will get me on the next round, Your Honor, if you don't mind. I'm just enjoying listening right now.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Daniel.
Why is Elizabeth Warren so popular? I mean, I look around on the internet and look up her positions. She's for free college, canceling student debt, boosting teacher pay, eliminating charter schools, Medicare.
You just gave all the reasons why she's so popular. She's so popular because these are all things that people love. So I'm seeing a lot of tweets defending her horrific tweets about Amazon, because they're saying, but Amazon doesn't pay enough taxes, and Amazon treats its employees really, really badly, and Amazon doesn't want them to unionize, and so people want this stuff. I mean, they do. They and she is, of all the politicians out there, she is the most principled on the left, in a sense that she has real proposals, detailed proposals on how to achieve these things. She has a rationale. So she's, I mean, thoughtful is the wrong word, but she's passionate about them and presents actual plans that are doable within the context of her world. And versus even Bernie Sanders, who comes across a little bit as, okay. I mean, he's, she's like, no, here's the plan, right? And she was famous for this in the debates, right? She had a plan for everything. If you went to a website, she articulated all the things that people actually want. I mean, I remember it dawned on me when Obamacare was passed, and there were all these surveys that showed that Obamacare was incredibly unpopular. And that really intrigued me because, it seemed to me like, no, I think people probably like Obamacare. Why is it so unpopular? Well, it turned out that at least a significant portion, not a majority, but a significant portion people who didn't like Obamacare didn't like it because it didn't go far enough. It didn't socialize enough. It wasn't principled enough. And she is principled in a corrupt sense, right? She actually believes this stuff. So that's what makes it popular.
And it makes sense that you, as you say, is telling a consistent story. How do you fight back against that for the people that really think she should be critical of Amazon? I mean, is it only the people in the middle who haven't quite decided that you sway one way or another, or?
No, I mean, you can sway other people. I mean, I've had people who've said they were socialists and who said they heard something I said and changed their mind, and then read Ayn Rand and really changed their mind. So you can still get them, but you just, look, we're not going to get the masses anytime soon.
Right.
It's just not going to happen, because what you need to get the masses is sustained regular effort, if you will. Mm-hmm. Sustained regular engagement. Mm-hmm. And it's going to happen slowly, so it doesn't happen all one day. But imagine, I mean, I've talked about this before, but imagine there were 1,000 objectivists on all these different public intellectuals, yes, constantly, day in, day out, explaining why, socialized medicine doesn't work, and it does. People would start being skeptical. Oh, but I heard this expert yesterday and he said it doesn't work. So why is Elizabeth Warren saying this? And it's not one crazy guy from the Ayn Rand Institute. They're like a few of them. There's a dozen of them. And they're on the TV, and I read it in the newspaper, and I heard a podcast, and now I'm hearing my friends talk about this issue. It's not that most people, you're going to get them to rethink their views. It's that their views are going to drift towards our views. They're just, in a sense, at least at a certain phase of transition, they're going to be just as unthinking but now the culture's moved. So and this brings me to what I've always said should be the focus, right? The focus needs to be to develop those 1,000 intellectuals. Now, to develop those 1,000 intellectuals, you have to find them, and finding them, you're going to impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. But to really change the world, what you need is 1,000 intellectuals. What you need is that number. And it's there's nothing more important than developing the intellectuals and then giving them the tools to go out there into the world and articulate their ideas from all different perspectives.
As long as people are arguing whether or not there should be free college or whether or not Amazon should be saying these things, as opposed to should there be free speech or not.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to take it to a whole different level before, sorry.
Well, but we have to address these issues about Amazon. So people realize, and again, if 100 people address these issues from Amazon in an intellectual perspective, and people started hearing it from them, it would cause them to challenge some of their premises. And then you'd start shifting. But if they just hear one or two people saying this, and everybody else is consistently on Elizabeth Warren's side, why are they going to rethink their beliefs? Their beliefs are popular. Their beliefs seem to be right. Everybody agrees with them. Important people agree with them. So we have to capture the intellectual high ground. There's no other way around it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that takes decades. It takes a long, long time. All right, let's do a few of these $20 super chats. All right. Why don't logical arguments resonate with people, particularly people who are smart enough to understand the logic? Because what they hold, they don't hold logically, in the sense that they got to where they are not through logic, but either through dogma or through emotion or through something else. And that's what they're not willing to give up on. So it's not like they believe Amazon is a bad company because they've logically induced and deduced that is the real problem in the world. It's that whatever envy or whatever is driving them, they have is unrelated to logic. And then when you address them with logic, they immediately think, wait a minute, he's tricking me. Why is he, what's going on here? This goes against what I believe, and their belief is the primary. And they don't want to accept the facts and the logic of the argument. They reject it. And the fact that somebody's smart, I mean, the smart people are the worst. They often are the least logical. They have the horsepower, but they don't have the willingness to engage. So you often see smart people completely evading reality, evading facts, evading logic. So it's why they hold the position they hold. If they hold it by logic, then logic should undo the position. If they hold it because some other deeper premise is dictating it, you have to challenge that deeper premise. If they hold it on faith, then you're going to have to challenge that faith. And some of them will give that up and some of them won't, because they're dedicated to that faith. All right, Michael, that's a generous contribution. Thank you. Government has assumed control over COVID vaccine acquisition and distribution, and in Canada it has failed miserably. I don't know why. Canada has socialized medicine. It should have gone smoothly and beautifully, given central planning. Is this a legitimate function of government, or should it be left to private sector? Also, I challenge Richard Bicker to super chat more money than me. Yeah, good luck with that one. Good luck with that one. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit, Michael. No, it's absolutely not a function of government. Absolutely not. It's a function of the marketplace. Government shouldn't have bought the vaccines. They shouldn't be distributing the vaccines. They should have had no involvement in the vaccine. The job of government was to test, trace, isolate, and that's it. And then it's up to the private sector to do the rest. There's no reason why vaccine development would have happened without government. You could have had insurance companies in a free market, let's say a true free market, you would have had insurance companies pre-buying large quantities of vaccines, assuming they worked and assuming they met the standards that the insurance company would set for efficaciousness. That would have motivated these drug companies to go out there and develop vaccines. Note that over 200 different companies were in vaccine development. Only 4 or 5 of, well, maybe more than 4 or 5, maybe about 10 of them have succeeded and have vaccine distributions. I'm including here the Russian vaccine, the Chinese vaccine, and maybe some others. But so there were 200 that did it without any government funding, without any assumption that the government would buy from them. So there's a lot of people interested in developing vaccine, partially for profit and partially because they love the science and they're willing to devote some money to trying to cure, solve a real health crisis. Distribution should have been done on the price mechanism. People should have been able to buy the vaccine at will. The vaccine should have gone, in a sense, the highest bidder. You could imagine insurance companies being massive buyers of vaccine, because why is an insurance company? Insurance company has a massive incentive to vaccinate the insured because it's cheaper to buy the vaccines and give them to the insured for free than it is for the insured to fall sick and then to have to pay the hospital for treatment, right? And then beyond that, hospitals would have bought vaccines because hospitals would have had a strong incentive to keep their staff healthy and to keep their staff working. Schools would have worked the vaccine. Big companies, Amazon, would have bought massive numbers of vaccine in order to vaccinate warehouse workers so that they could continue the shipping. Supermarkets would have. So when I say the vaccine should have gone to the highest bidder wouldn't necessarily have been rich people. It would have been businesses that would have wanted to vaccinate their employees and vaccinate their employees, not for altruistic reasons, but because that was the only way the business could continue to function. And they needed healthy employees in order to do that, right? So imagine if the price mechanism, FedEx, if pharmacies and doctors and nurses all over the country could be, imagine if one of these vaccine companies developed a self-administered vaccine. Why do we have to go to have a nurse prick us? I mean, there are these, what they do with, when you're allergic to something, there's this, what's it called? The shot you take. And so there's all kind of technologies where you can vaccinate yourself. Why can't we do that? Right, because we don't trust people, right? They might overdo it, take the wrong, whatever. We assume EpiPens. Yeah, EpiPens. Thank you. But there are other technologies. There's a wide array of technologies. There are technologies that for insulin delivery technologies. There are all kinds of ways in which we could be delivering these vaccines that the market would have provided us, and making the market still will down the road, because there's a possibility that we'll have to be vaccinated on a regular basis against COVID. The whole world, the whole way in which we think about healthcare, public health, vaccines, viruses, would be completely and utterly different in a free market. You can't even imagine what would happen. I mean, I did a show when COVID first started, how a market would have responded, what would have happened at hospitals, what would have happened in insurance companies, what would have been the incentives, what would they all have done instead of lockdowns, right? And it's very different. And how the prep would have been different, how they would have prepared themselves for the possibility of a pandemic in a way that governments can't do and never really do. So it's the whole thing is disappointing, depressing. I don't know. It's, the beauty of the markets. I don't know how people don't see this, but every time I walk into a grocery store, they talk about aesthetic experiences, right? Now, this is more true in California than in Puerto Rico, granted. But every time I walk into a grocery store, the beauty of having all these products available to me, just like that, all there, multiple versions, multiple choices, beautifully displayed in ways where somebody has already thought where I will want to go, what I will want after I buy this, make it convenient to buy that, and it's just, and how they display the fruits and vegetables, just the fruit and vegetable displays. And even how that's evolved even the last 20 years, right? Today, it's so much prettier. It's so much more enticing. Everything's so much more colorful. I think part of that is probably from Whole Foods and the competition that Whole Foods provided, the way they displayed vegetables and fruits as if these were something, to be really sought after. And I think now regular supermarkets do the same thing. It's just a beautiful thing. And when you think about that's markets, that's the incentives of markets, why? And then why can't people extrapolate from that to healthcare and education and a million other things that markets could take over and do? And no, this is special. And it works in grocery store and food. It doesn't work in healthcare. I've often asked people why, and nobody has a reason, right? Oh, people need healthcare, but they need food too. And we let those greedy, farmers and distributors and grocery stores deliver that food, and somehow it works beautifully. Not just works, it works beautifully. It's frustrating. All right, we got two. We'll do 3 more super chats and then we'll go back to you guys. A college is getting rid of SAT testing so that they can make more money. Why restrict only smart kids to giving your institution money when you can get it from everyone? Or is this a further implementation of egalitarianism? Yeah, I mean, it's not about getting more money because Harvard can't admit more students. Harvard turns down more students than it admits. It turns down a huge number of students. This is about giving the universities more control over who they admit while pretending to be advocates for egalitarianism. So the problem with an SAT, now SAT scores are not perfect, and I'm not sure I'm a supporter of SAT scores, but SAT scores have a semblance of objectivity. Everybody gets the same test. There's a score, you can rank people. That's very anti-egalitarian. So you get rid of that. Now the idea is, we've taken away differences between people. But Harvard still has to choose, but now it can use its parameters to choose. And those parameters might mean, for example, we want a more diverse student body, or we want, and it could be economically diverse, it could be culturally diverse, it could be racially diverse, it could be all kinds of parameters, right? We don't want too many Asians, for example, if you're Harvard, right? They don't want Asians, right? Because if they, and for example, if they just followed SATs, right, they would have a lot more Asian students because Asians do very well at SAT scores. And they don't want the SATs to dictate that for them. So I think it gives them more flexibility while, in a sense, virtue signaling their egalitarianism. Even though they're not going to be egalitarian, they're still going to have to choose because way more people apply for Harvard than can be accepted. All right, we're getting these high dollar amounts coming in with questions. So let me take Dave's question. Is it true plants don't feel anything because they're stationary, and animals feel only pleasure and pain because they move through space, while human beings experience pleasure, pain, happiness, and sadness because we move through space and time? Wow. I don't know. I mean, that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. But there certainly seems to be a correlation between, plants move in the sense that they grow, right? So a plant does grow through space. So is there a evolutionary survival reason for plants not to have feelings? Do we know plants don't have any kind of feelings? Do we actually know that? I guess they don't have the organs that produce the kind of chemical response that results in feeding. I mean, when they don't have water, right? When they need water, do they feel something? I guess they're not conscious, so they don't feel anything. So no, you're right. Plants don't have consciousness. I think that's the key. So the key here is not movement. The key here is consciousness. Now you could argue consciousness is required for movement, right? So when you evolve creatures that move, but that's not true either, because bacteria move, amoebas move, they don't have consciousness. So no, I think the issue is consciousness, and the issue is complexity of actions in order to survive. So it's a complexity involved, and it's consciousness. So animals are conscious. They have a sense of their environment. They are aware of their environment in a way that a plant is not. And part of that involves feeling. Part of that involves some simple emotions. And I don't know if it's just pleasure and pain. I mean, if you have a pet, it appears that they have more complex than just pleasure and pain. So I think there's more of that. In terms of human beings, now you've taken consciousness and you made it even more complex, and you've given this consciousness free will. And now the mechanism is far more complex. The decisions, the choices, the movements, everything that the organism is now doing is far more complicated. Less is programmed, more involves choices. Those choices result in greater emotional scope and complexity, just like the consciousness has greater scope and complexity. Okay, the follow-up is just a follow-up. Pleasure is the reward for acting successfully across space, while happiness is the reward for acting successfully across time, which is what a conceptual being can do. The only point of concept is to predict the future. Yes, so there is a sense in which it's across time. Pleasure is the reward, but you get a sense that animals, have some sense of time. It's not that they have no sense of time. They have some sense of time, some sense of a future, and they have some more complex emotions than displeasure. So I don't know. I think you're onto something. I definitely think that this issue of time is really, really important for human beings, but it's not just time. It has to do with complexity. It has to do with the fact that we have an array of choices that are not automatized. And as a consequence, I mean, happiness, but it's not just happiness, it's all the emotions that are positive, and there's a whole wide array of them, and all the emotions that are negative, and there's a wide array of them. And that has to do with the complexity of choices relates to the complexity of emotions that we have. So it has to do with choice and availability of choices to a conscious being. And human beings, because of free will, have the most choices, and therefore the most array of these things, right? Right. Yeah, so I think movement is important. I think time is important, but I don't think it captures everything. I don't think you can boil down all human cognition, all human choices just to the issue of time. But it is an interesting way of thinking of it. All right, let's go back to our contributors here. And I think we've been joined by Jacob. So I'm going to let Jacob ask the first question. Hey, Jacob.
Hey, you're on. Sorry for joining late. I was reading over the weekend Rand's essay on the issue of man's rights and how she compared the printing of money and devaluing the currency to the new rights that have been added and how they devalue the standard rights. What do you think are the most entrenched and destructive right that has been added to the American psyche, and how would you go at attacking it besides just attacking altruism?
I mean, I think it's the very conception of a right to somebody else's labor. And then you can fill in the blank. So all the rights that we have that are supposedly that we have, the fake rights, the pseudo rights, are fundamentally wrong because they're right to somebody else's stuff. they are taking a need or a want and turning it into a right, and turning a desire into something that grants you permission to take from somebody else, right? So it's, and it really starts, it starts earlier, but it's codified into the American psyche with FDR and his, you have a right to not feel fear. You have a right to not want, right? To not have your survival, your material survival challenged, right? You have a right to basic income, basically, is what he's saying. You have a right to a basic way of survival. And I think it starts with that. It starts with okay, look, there are poor people here, and it goes directly to altruism, right? Because that's how they get you hooked. Because they say, look at these people, they're really starving, they're really struggling, there are no jobs, they can't feed themselves. Don't you think all human beings have a right to at least some basic? And who's going to say, very few people are going to say no. Yeah, altruism demands that we help them. And if we're not helping them, then the government is going to do it. So that's one angle. Another angle is a property rights angle, and to show the conflict between property rights and this. But unless you challenge the altruism, then they're going to give up on the property rights. Right? They're going to reject the idea of property. And it's exactly what's happened, right? So property rights are meaningless now. And people have a right to healthcare, and a right to an education, and a right to a basic income, and a right to a basic standard of living. So it's very hard to challenge these notions of rights at the level of political philosophy without going deeper into what is the basis for that political philosophy. So unless you challenge the altruism, I don't think there's a way to do it. The other way is to emphasize the positive. That is to emphasize why we need rights, which nobody does, right? People just, and partially that's because in the Enlightenment, they didn't spend enough time explaining why we needed rights. They fall back on this concept of natural rights. God just gave them to us. We have them. They're in us in some way. And that leads people like Yuval Harari to say, well, when you dissect a human being, you don't find any rights inside. So, there must not be any rights because they're not part of us. So you have to build up rights. And for that, you have to say, well, for us to survive, we need to use our minds. For us to use our minds, we need to be free. Once you give people the ability to take our stuff or to force us to work for them, you're eliminating our ability to think for ourselves, to be free, and therefore you're undermining the whole concept of rights. So these new so-called rights undermine the very idea of rights, the very concept of rights, the very origin of rights. There is no such thing of right as rights. Rights are null and void if these rights are legitimate, because they deny the essence of rights, which is freedom. They deny rights to some. Right? So you can show them the self-refuting nature of what they're arguing in a sense of what rights really are and what they refer to.
Okay, thank you.
That's sure. All right, James.
Going back to a little bit of talking about spreading the movement and getting the ideas out there to more people. I find that sometimes I struggle with, if you have a close family or friend or someone who you see them on a path that is probably not going to end well for them, or is wrong, based on your ideas. Kind of finding the balance between how much to push with giving them what you think they should do. Listening to kind of the understanding objectivism course and talking about the principle of honesty and the initiation of force, and how you can't literally change someone. You can't force someone to change their mind.
Yep.
Which is obviously true, but to then what extent, because it's some people, when you try to give them that, they kind of push back, and then it makes them more antagonistic to your ideas or your suggestions. Then other people are more open to it if you kind of drop it as a planted seed and then just kind of let it go after that. So I don't know, just kind of, if you have any thoughts on obviously, because you engage in a lot more of these conversations, I think, than any of us. Like, what do you find is like a effective way to do that? Obviously you're not like antagonizing the person themselves, but just kind of trying to challenge their viewpoints and sort of, that sort of thing.
I mean, I think it's different family and in a sense, strangers or friends. And even friends, it's different. Like family, you have to think, what value do I get from family members? Do I want to have a relationship with them? If they don't accept my views, how much do I care, right? So for example, if you want to have a relationship with your parents and they're never going to accept your views, then why argue with them? What's the point, right? Who are you trying to convince? Who are you trying to prove? So it's just antagonism. So you just don't talk about these things and focus your relationship on the things you want the relationship to be about. So one of the things you learn to do is be purposeful in your relationships. That is, figure out why you have the relationship you have with person X and customize that relationship. Be conscious of what you're doing with the relationship, particularly when it comes to family. Too many people think family is all or nothing, and they usually land up with nothing as a consequence, or they land up selling out themselves. But there are ways to customize your relationship with your family, so it's not all or nothing, right? If I'm just chatting with people, like last night, I had all these cryptocurrency guys. And the thing I like to do is just prod them and plant seeds and question and encourage them to go read more, because you're not going to change anybody's mind in a conversation. So the primary thing you want to do is stimulate thought. And that's what I try to do in my talks. That's what I try to do in debates. That's what I try doing to some extent on the shows. It's just to plant some seeds, and the person needs to go think about it. The person needs to read about it. Things like that, right? So it's you don't have to lay out the entire philosophy with them in a conversation. It's not going to go well if you do. Just take a topic that's interesting, that you have an interesting perspective on, different than theirs, and prod them a little bit to think about that more.
Sure, because I definitely relate to what you said. I think I definitely fall typically on the side of nothing, with a lot of people, because I just don't. It doesn't matter to me one way or another whether they accept it, and then it's just one of those things where.
Yeah, but then you might be missing out, right? Because then you're missing out an opportunity. So the thing is to prod enough to know if there's something there or not.
Sure.
And not to waste your time if there's nothing there.
Sure. Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Daniel.
So I think everyone agrees that these attacks on Asians are terrible. And there certainly are petitions and so forth to stop Asian hate.
Yep.
What should the government be doing? The biggest call is to treat these as hate crimes. Treat them, punish them more severely than would normally be done for the same crime. Should the government just be enforcing existing laws, or is there something more that should be done?
Yeah, I don't think hate crime is a legitimate concept. I don't think there should be such thing as hate crimes. You kill somebody. Almost everybody who commits murder hates the person they're murdering, usually, right? That's why they do it. So the added spin of you hate a whole group versus you just hated this one person, I don't think makes it worse. I don't think the government should be doing anything about it other than, certainly using the bully pulpit as kind of if it had moral authority, using the moral authority to just say, this is wrong. Now, if we had the right kind of government, I don't think these kind of crimes would happening. I think this is a consequence of, the kind of rhetoric we get out of our government from both left and right, but particularly in this case, Donald Trump, who made a big deal out of this being an Asian virus. And while he might have not embraced harassing Asians, he fed into the worst element within the people who paid a lot of attention to everything that he said, right? So the worst of his followers did extrapolate from that to violence against Asians. But really, there is no role for the government here. The police should, unless there's a conspiracy, right? And then the police should be monitoring conspiracies and should be monitored. But it looks like with the Asians, it looks like these are one-off type crimes. These are, just people who are pissed off and go after a local Asian person. They could be a grandmother. They're usually old people, so they don't even fight people their own size. I mean, it's really sick. I don't know that there's anything that can be done other than, this is racism. Racism is disgusting, and and it's wrong. And as soon as you violate somebody's rights, that's it. One way to do it is just to start prosecuting. I mean, I think there's a huge difference between, we have too many laws and too many misdemeanors and too many, if you beat somebody up, you should go to jail for a long time. Particularly if you beat somebody up for no good reason, right? Not because you thought they were threatening you, or not because, not even what they call it, second-degree murder, where your passions inflamed, but just because. So this is the sense in which a hate crime might come in, right? Just because they look the way they look pisses you off and you beat them up. I don't know that I'm sympathetic to the idea that you should throw away the key, but I'm sympathetic to throwing away the key about a lot of crimes, right? like rape and certain violent crimes. People, that's it. You've destroyed another human being's life. By what reason would you ever legitimately re-enter society?
That makes the argument that the punishment should be, first of all, certain, and second of all, a lot more severe for all these crimes,
Yes.
If you're going to beat someone up.
Yes. So I think any violent crime, punishment should be more severe than they are today. And of course, the nonviolent crimes are not crimes, and they should be. So I'd like to see the prison population be dramatically smaller and staying there for longer. Right? That's pisses off both left and the right that way. So it's
You're very
I've never
egalitarian.
understood sympathy for violent criminals. Particularly if they're not 16-year-olds or whatever, they're not very young, but an adult who uses their fists, particularly in certain circumstances where there's zero reason. You're in a bar fight or something, you're drunk, or it can be attenuating circumstances. Your girlfriend was insulted by somebody. All right, but you just go up to somebody and you beat them up because you don't like them. That's yeah.
You're very egalitarian. You treat Democrats and Republicans the same, left and right.
I try. All right, Roy.
Yeah, I just want to read an anecdote about the New York Times. Some while ago, you talked about Astral Codex 10, who had, I think he had given the New York Times some information with the understanding that they would not disclose his identity. And they did. Well, they've been doing scoundrelly things like that for a long time. In 1990, the musical Kiss of the Spider Woman previewed in City University of New York in Purchase, which is outside of New York City. And they made it clear, it was by Don Kander and Fred Ebb and Terrence McNally wrote the book. They made it very clear that press were not invited. They do not want to be reviewed. It's a preview. They're just trying it out. But even a preview, it was a tryout. Well, Frank Rich, who was the theater critic of the New York Times, and therefore was very powerful, said, well, no way. He bought a ticket. Whether he was reimbursed by the Times, I don't know. And he wrote a negative review. And I didn't read the review. I heard that it was a negative review. And I'm not saying the review was inaccurate. I don't know. But the point is, and the Times published it. That's the point. If he's a son of a bitch, that's one thing. But for the Times to publish it, now anyone who knows anything about theater knows how difficult it is to produce a play, to write a play, you need the privacy to get the kinks worked out before the critics come. And he had to get there first to kill it. John Simon, who's one of the very few theater critics or critics that I respect, told me that he saw that performance, that production. And what he did is he sent a note to the creators of the show with his feedback. That's someone who a lot of people hated because he was really tough. And he could be nasty, but he loved theater.
Sure.
And he was a gentleman. And that's the way to do it. He wished theater well.
Yep.
So that was the times, and it was over 30 years ago, and they're still doing it.
I think that's right. And I think they probably have done it for a long, long time. There's certain arrogance. There's certain arrogance that conveys. And the woman who did the story about this guy in Silicon Valley, she claimed it was Times policy, and senior people at the time said it's not a policy. So people make stuff up in order to do this, and it really is disgusting.
They're unconscionable.
All right, Adam.
Yes, about so-called hate crimes. I think in many cases there's a combination of crimes which are committed with the same act. In particular, the Atlanta shootings, there is a very good article by Tracy Kwan in the Los Angeles Times explaining that this is an act of religious terrorism. The massage workers were doing things forbidden by this guy's religion, and he killed them for that.
Yep.
Just like the case in the Netherlands where a filmmaker was killed for making a film contrary to the religion of the killer.
Yep.
And I think the second crime also deserves punishment, which needs to be added to the punishment for a regular murder.
So what's the second crime? The terrorist aspect of it?
The intimidation.
Okay. I mean, I think that's right. So that makes sense, but you'd have to prove that, right? That was the purpose, that the purpose was partially to terrorize in the name of a cause, a particular cause.
Yes, but in many of the cases against Asians, the terroristic threat is explicitly stated. You should not be here.
Yep.
It's an act aimed at intimidating potential Asian immigrants from coming to the United States.
I think it's a really good point. But I wouldn't call it a hate crime. I think you'd add, because intimidation intimidation or terrorism already a crime, right?
It's terroristic intimidation.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's right. And I agree about the massage parlors. I mean, I did a whole show on that where I laid out kind of the religious ideas behind this. I mean, it's clearly part of this purity culture within evangelical Christianity that was leading to this. And of course, what made it worse for the guy who did the murders, the reason he targeted these particular massage parlors is that they had seduced him. And therefore they were instruments of the devil in seducing him. And therefore the only way to stop being seduced was to kill the object, the thing that was seducing him. So they were at fault because he had sinned. And it's part of this religious insanity. All right. Thanks, Adam. Let's see. All right. We did Jacob. Nick. There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Yep. You got me going with this crypto thing. Have you done any shows on crypto?
I have not, I don't think. I've talked about crypto in short bits, but I haven't done a show on crypto.
Was there anybody there at the crypto conference that was interesting that you can perhaps get on the show and have a conversation. I mean, this crypto is one part of it. There's the blockchain part, which has legitimate uses. Crypto is the problematic application. So we're just wondering if you can get somebody who knows. There's over 20 cryptos. For my Bitcoin is just one of them.
I know, and so the problem, yes, there were quite a few people I could get on the show to talk about it. There are quite a few objectivists I could get on the show to talk about it.
Get them.
Yeah.
Oh, your young audience would love it.
No, you're right. I should drill them with all the questions I have. I should get one of these guys on. That's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. Some of the crypto people are Bitcoin people. They, in spite of the fact that there are 20 different cryptos, they strongly believe, because of networking effects and other effects, I mean, not irrationally completely, but because of networking effects, that Bitcoin has already won. I made the argument that it's way too soon to determine the winner in the crypto race. I also, made the argument, for example, that people say crypto has value, that Bitcoin has value because of its ledger. But my argument was, but the only purpose of the ledger is to record Bitcoin. So it seems like a completely circular argument. If the ledger has no value beyond recording the Bitcoin transactions themselves, then I don't see what the value is of the Bitcoin. It's just a circular. On the other hand, Ethereum has value in securing contracts, in secure contracts. So maybe one of the Ethereum currencies can actually be a currency based on that. But then there's the issue of inflation. Any one of these cryptocurrencies, even the ones with a finite quantity, can be multiplied ad infinitum. And you could have multiple different cryptos. So why isn't that inflating the value of any particular crypto? So anyway, there are a lot of questions I have about this, and maybe I should get like a panel of 2 or 3 Bitcoin crypto objectivists to answer my questions, because I know nothing about this.
What about
the questions I have for it?
What about the issue of price discovery? The buyer doesn't know what they're getting till settlements at the end of the day. The seller doesn't know what he's getting for the product.
Real problem in a very volatile market, right? Very volatile market.
Yeah. So
yeah, I agree.
There's that issue. It's not backed by anything. So
the argument is it's backed by the ledger, right? That's the circular argument.
So what do you mean it's backed by the ledger?
I don't know.
So yeah, they always avoid. When you try to corner them, they always avoid. You know what I mean?
Very difficult. It's very difficult. But on the other hand, I'm not quite really ready to dismiss it all. And, and because it's too easy to dismiss a new technology, and it's not clear to me that there couldn't be uses here that relate to a medium of exchange. Obviously, the blockchain seems like it's a useful technology, but it could be. I'll give you an example, right? And I think this is a relevant example, but it might not be, because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So here I'm warning everybody that I don't really know what I'm talking about. I have airline miles. Are my airline miles money?
IRS thinks so.
I think IRS is right. I mean, it doesn't think so, because it's not taxing my miles. I have a lot of miles. None of them get taxed.
They've gone after people.
They've gone after people who've made a big deal. Yes, they've gone after a few cases, but they don't pursue it consistently, because I've used millions and millions of miles.
They went after
hotels, for cars, for airlines. You can use your airline miles to buy products.
Yeah.
You can actually buy products. So airline miles, which are just digital, right? They're just digital. They're just are they a currency? Yeah, they are. Ultimately, because who stands behind them? Who stands behind them is the airline, who's willing to redeem them, is guaranteed a redemption of these for a particular product. It's not gold, but it's flying, or it's a toaster, right? Or it's whatever it is that toaster reference. I'm sure none of you know, except some of us. Some of us are old enough here to remember toasters. And remember, the toasters were used to induce people to open checking accounts. That was the key role of a toaster, is to get people to invest in a checking account. Anyway, airline miles are in a sense a currency, right? And you could make that much more sophisticated. You could now build all kinds of financial instruments or off of these airline miles. And what makes them a currency is the fact that they're redeemable ultimately into flying. And I think what crypto is missing is the redeemability. What is it redeemable into at some kind of fixed rate? And when they can actually solve that problem, that's when it'll actually be a useful currency. Until then, I don't think Bitcoin or any of these cryptos can actually be used as money.
What happens if an entrepreneur like Peter Schiff comes in and says and backs it and gets somebody to back it by gold?
Then I've always said that in a free market, crypto would be backed by gold or something like gold, right? Some real asset. The only reason you can get away with crypto without it being backed today, and the reason there's an advantage today for crypto not to be backed up by gold, is that today government can confiscate the gold and therefore can confiscate your crypto. So it's not as useful for the purposes that they want it, which is primarily to engage in illegal activity. I mean, what Bitcoin really provides is a means to engage in illegal activity. That's where its value comes from. And the more things you make illegal, the higher the value of Bitcoin will be.
And I think it's just a matter of time before the government goes after it as it gets bigger as an asset class. Because right now it's distracted with COVID.
Yep.
As it gets bigger and bigger, I watch BNM Bloomberg every morning, and it's Bitcoin's going through the roof. So it's just a matter of time.
Yep.
And all these guys are going to be bag holders.
I agree with you. I agree, and I tell them that, and they but some of them are smart. Some of them are some of them are buying real assets with the Bitcoin. They made a fortune off of Bitcoin. Many of them have made hundreds of millions of dollars off Bitcoin. If you bought Bitcoin when it was trading for cents on the dollar, right? For a few cents of Bitcoin, you could be a centimillionaire today. And I know several people like that. All they've done is buy Bitcoin and waited and hang on to it. And some of them are diversifying, and they will stay rich unless they blow it all. But
you could have said the same thing with Tesla. They won't sell the stock no matter what.
Well,
it's a cult.
Tesla is a cult. And it even has a cult leader called Elon Musk. All right, let's do some of these super chats quickly. Have you ever had a major disagreement with an objectivist intellectual you highly respect? Were you shocked that they saw things differently than you? Well, what do you mean by major, right? I don't know what major means. So is the fact that objectivist intellectuals disagree shocking? No, not at all. We don't disagree about A is A, but on the application is complex. It's difficult. It's challenging. I've seen, Leonard Peikoff disagree with Harry Binswanger and the other way around. I disagreed with Leonard on immigration, which is an application in politics. Usually when I disagree with Leonard Peikoff, or put it this way, when I disagree with Leonard Peikoff on something philosophical, I am almost always wrong, or I am always wrong, and he's right. On applying the philosophy to politics, I'm not sure I'm always wrong. I think sometimes he's wrong, and sometimes he'll even admit that. So it's not shocking at all, given the complexity of reality, given the complexity of human action, given the complexity of these things. And it's easy to be wrong about the application of objectivism. I did a whole talk about how applying objectivism is hard, and therefore it's not surprising at all that people disagree about it and that they disputes it. One of the reasons Leonard and I did that debate about immigration was to show that, hey, two objectivist intellectuals who are friends can disagree about an issue of applied objectivism. You know, I would never debate Leonard Peikoff about epistemology or about the theory behind morality. But even in morality, its application, yeah, we could disagree about a particular application of morality because it's hard to apply morality. It's not easy. So no, we're not. You know, we're not a cult. We're not a cult. All right. That's a lot of imagining this is Trudeau Canada. Okay, I don't get that. Super chat. I noticed I have some tendency to have second-handed reactions to things. That is, seeing lazy people and thinking, why should I work so hard? Can you comment on how to tell between proper and improper reaction to vices and injustices? Well, I think that you have to think about why is it wrong to say, why should I work so hard when seeing somebody lazy? It's because their laziness is not about you, right? Their laziness is about them. Their laziness is a reflection of them, and it's an issue for them, for them to resolve. So by you making it personal about you, right, you're being second-handed. Your decision about whether to work hard or not to work hard should not be based on whether other people are lazy or not, but based on the value that the work has to you. So justice is about treating people the way they deserve. And anytime you catch yourself where you're letting other people's behavior impact you, you have to question why and what's behind it. So and that will determine whether your reaction is proper or improper. So it's proper to say that person's lazy. I want to fire him. I don't think it's proper to say, why should I work so hard? And if it's why should I work so hard because I'm not going to be compensated for the hard work I do anyway, then you should look for another job. Right. So it can be that you should give up on the value of hard work because somebody else is lazy. All right, these are super chat questions with less money associated with them, so we're going to do them fast. Was Jennifer Burns trying to smear Ayn Rand or take an honest scholarly look at her works? I don't think either one is true. I think she wasn't trying to smear Ayn Rand. I don't think that was the goal. But whether she was completely honest, I'm not sure either, right? I mean, I think she engaged in certain places where she didn't understand. She pretended to understand, where something went against what she believed is the right approach. She rejected that. So I don't know that she's 100% can be considered an honest scholar. I don't know. But I also don't think she tried to smear Ayn Rand in what she did. I think some of it was her lack of understanding. Some of it might have been her evasion about what Ayn Rand said and what it would mean for her to really dig in and to really fully understand Ayn Rand. Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. I don't know what this issue of giving somebody power, what does power even mean, right? Why would I give somebody power if that power was over my life? So the whole point is not to give people power over your life. I understand what you're trying to get at is, can people resist the temptation of power making them immoral? But what does power mean? And what kind of power? Economic power doesn't corrupt. Political power does. I don't want to give people political power, even if they could stand up to that corruption. Right? The political power is the power to, and the whole point of the American system of government is to constrain power, to limit power, to reduce power. Nothing against the current objectivist intellectuals, but how much further along would our movement be if Sam Harris or Hitchens were an objectivist? A lot further along. You know, that's true. They are, people like that are charismatic. they're smart, they have area expertise, they work hard, they work on delivering their message to a large number of people, and they have a real style that is attractive to people. So yeah, we need more. We need more. We need the Sam Harrises, and we need the Steven Pinkers of objectivism. There's no question about that. I had one other question I wanted. Yeah, this one. Yuran said multiple times that politics is downstream from culture. I agree. But to what extent does Yuran think technological progress can overcome culture and shift political direction in a positive way? Some examples. Suppose we make advances to nuclear technology in which everyone has a mini nuclear reactor running on their property. Would we be able to eliminate the government mandated energy utility monopolies and eliminate crisis situations like Texas current recent experienced? Suppose we build the COVID mRNA, we build off of the COVID mRNA vaccine technology to significantly reduce major diseases like cancer, heart disease, etc. Would that lessen pressure for a universal healthcare system? Or is this just wishful thinking and I'm missing one of the major points of Atlas Shrugged? What would an alternative plot look like for Atlas Shrugged if John Galt had released his working model of the world? So there's a sense in which you're right. And I think the sense in which you're right is that technology can delay the end. And that's the point about the motive in Atlas Shrugged. If John Galt releases the motive of Atlas Shrugged, it delays the reckoning, but the reckoning is coming. You can't bypass the philosophy. So they don't try to nationalize healthcare. So they'll try to nationalize something else. Or they'll try to nationalize the vaccines. Or they'll try to nationalize the research. Or they'll come at it in one way or another to try to enslave you. And people will be willing to do it, even though technology worked in this place. People don't learn by examples. I mean, look how many technologies we have today that work amazingly. And you would think that would convince people, oh, markets work. Technology is the solution. Freedom is the solution. They don't learn that way. So while technology can limit the scope that the government has over our lives, look, we had COVID lockdowns, and because of technology, we could still work. Because of technology, we could still get our shopping done at Amazon. Is that lessened Elizabeth Warren's desire to break Amazon? Actually, you could say that technology enabled the lockdowns. You could argue that without technology, they couldn't have gotten away with the lockdowns. The only reason we submitted to the lockdowns and agreed to the lockdowns is because it wasn't that bad, because we had Zoom, right? So technology can buy us time, but it can't reverse the course. And it can make life more pleasant as we descend into hell. Most intellectuals today disconnected from reality and play pretend world with their peers to seem sophisticated. Yes, I think that's right. Some of these are not questions, obviously. Do you see New York and California dying a slow death? I'm seeing New York starting to bounce back. Rental prices are returning to almost pre-COVID levels. I mean, they're definitely going to bounce back from the depths. Whether they bounce back to 2019, and remember, California and New York are still states with net negative immigration. That is, more people are leaving than are coming in. So the states had problems before COVID. COVID just exacerbated those. So they'll come back, but generally they're in decline, just like the rest of the country is in decline. People forget how productive New York and California are, that they are productive powerhouses, and they're not going to just disappear easily. The productive people that are there are going to continue producing, and therefore these states and these cities are going to continue being places that have a lot of wealth in them, and therefore are very attractive to some people. But generally, the culture is declining, and the culture in these places are declining with it. And because in these places, not only is the culture declining, but the taxes and regulations and so on are worse, people are leaving, and it's going to be tough. But look, California, in spite of people leaving, prices of real estate only go up. And right now they're booming in California. I don't think that's true in downtown LA and downtown San Francisco, but in the suburbs, people are leaving the cities and going to suburbs. Prices are through the roof. You demonstrate communication through logos, pathos, and ethos beautifully, as did Rand in her novels. Where did you learn how to do public speaking? Some from people like Leonard Peikoff, his communication course, a class I took with him on teaching in the 1990s, and then a lot from just experience, from just doing it, from teaching. So most of it is from teaching, what works, what doesn't, and from taking it seriously, like any professional, right? So I sucked as a teacher in the beginning. And then I would ask myself, why are the kids not getting it? Why can't I communicate? What's wrong with what I'm doing? And I would fix it. And it's the back and forth, do, fix, fail, improve, fail, improve, fail, improve, that gets you to be better. And just like you get better at any profession, I've done so much speaking now that it would be ridiculous if I wasn't good at it. Because, I mean, it would mean I'm not taking it seriously. It would mean I'm not working to improve and not learning from my mistakes. But you've got to constantly learn and constantly improve. And then asking certain questions at certain key points, like, why am I communicating? What's the purpose of communication? What am I trying to achieve? So things like that are, it's important for you to understand your own motivation. And then, are you succeeding? Are you doing what you intend to do to the audience, right? And a lot of that is just being aware of what so having a lot of speakers don't care about their audience. That's weird, but it's true, right? So caring about your audience and monitoring whether you'll be successful or not. That is monitoring. So for example, one way to do it is at the end of a talk, ask the audience what 3 points they got from your talk, and then compare it to the 3 points you wanted to convey in your talk. And most speakers will be shocked at the difference between what they wanted to convey to the audience and what the audience actually got. And once you start thinking about that, then you start thinking about, okay, what can I do to get these 3 points to the audience and not something else, like, you know, writing an original essay, or being perfect, or every sentence being perfection and could be quoted in an article and be, Ayn Rand would say, yes, thumbs up on that one, right? If that's your standard, you're not going to be a good speaker, I don't think. I mean, unless you're Leonard Peikoff, who's exceptional at doing both, but that's unusual. That is very unusual to have that ability to both be conversational in your talking, to have that kind of ability, and have every sentence count. And even there, you know, Leonard would edit himself if he was publishing it for written form, right? All right, very happy I ran into your content, huge fan. My question, I currently live in Southern California, getting fed up with it. What's the best place to live in the United States? No Puerto Rico. No Puerto Rico? You're missing out. I don't know. I mean, it depends. What do you value? Low taxes? Well, you could go to, what is it? Montana, I think, or Wyoming. You could go to Nevada, you could go to Tennessee, you could go to Texas or Florida. But what weather do you like? I mean, you might prefer to go to Wyoming, or you might prefer Florida, or you might prefer Texas. What kind of culture do you want? Do you want to live in a city? Do you want to live in the countryside? So there is no best place to live as a Platonic ideal. There's the best place for you. So you would have to make a list of your values and what you value in terms of a place, and then make a choice based on that. How much you care about weather? How much do you care about culture? How much do you care about a vibrant city? How much do you care about job opportunities? How much do you care about taxes? And then take all of those factors into account to determine what the best place to live. Think about the bean in Chicago, completely worthless sculpture. I think that related to what Roy was talking about. I don't know the bean in Chicago. Is there more content, books, articles, lectures on psychoepistemology than Harry Binswanger's lectures? I am becoming very interested in it, but can't seem to find anything for further reading. I think there's his material, and I think his wife, Jean, has content on psychoepistemology. But other than that, there's no explicit content on psychoepistemology. I mean, obviously, in some of Leonard Peikoff's courses, there's material on it, but explicitly content devoted to psychoepistemology, I'd say is Harry and Jean Binswanger. To build on your comment from last show, seeking truly selfish happiness means forming deep connections with other high-value people. If you're self-absorbed, that is something you can never experience. Good point. I think that's absolutely right. Self-absorption prevents you from having quality relationships with quality people. You can't relate to other people. You can only relate to yourself. So that creates a real challenge, and you can't achieve happiness completely. You're giving up a big chunk of happiness if you're giving up on other people. Could elephants and dolphins be given rights because they show levels of free will, like the mirror test? I don't think so. I don't think it's an issue of levels of free will. Now, I don't know, and I don't have an opinion about whether dolphins and elephants have free will. I know a couple of objectivists who wrote a paper that argues that all conscious beings have some level of free will. I know other objectivist philosophers who disagree with them, so that's a debate about that. But even if elephants and dolphins have some level of free will, rights are a consequence of a reasoning mind, of a conceptual faculty. There's no reason to believe that elephants and dolphins have a conceptual faculty. They form concepts, they invent things, they make profound choices about the way they're going to live. They might have minor choices that they make, but there's a big difference between a conceptual mentality like a human mentality and with the ability to, where force is an issue, where thinking is their means of survival. Thinking is not a dolphin or an elephant's means of survival. And therefore, rights are not relevant to them. Yeah, that's a good one. James says, they can't organize their society and establish principles. That's right. There's no organization. What would rights mean to an elephant? Nothing. They mean something to you, but only in relation to other human beings, because they understand the social context in which they're in. Do you believe in a death penalty? Why not? Go ahead, Jacob.
Is consciousness and rights on this point on-off, or is it a scale of like 0 to 100?
I think consciousness is a scale. Well, it's not a scale because there's a leap when it comes to human beings. So there's consciousness, and then there's human beings who have because they have free will, the nature of their consciousness is different than a non-free will consciousness. Rights are on off. There's no different levels of rights, right? I think morality applies differently in respect to your behavior towards animals. The level to which their consciousness matters on a moral basis. So if you step on ants, it doesn't matter, right? It has no moral standing. But if you just kill a dog for fun, there's something morally wrong with that. To take a conscious being who experiences pain and pleasure, who has some awareness of the world around them, and just wipe them out or inflict pain on them on purpose, there's something very wrong morally about that. But that doesn't mean the dog has rights. Do you believe in the death penalty? Why or why not? I do if it were infallible, right? I would if it was infallible. So to the extent that we get to the point where we can get to the point where it's truly beyond a reasonable doubt, that is, that there's no question that we have 100% certainty on something, then I have no problem with the death penalty. But since there is always the potential for error, and particularly when in some cases there's significant potential for error, and we've seen people on death row years later, it's discovered that they're innocent. I think because of that, I'm against it, because of the potential. That's irreversible. Now, jailing somebody is irreversible in the sense that you can't give them back their time, but life is irreversible in a whole different dimension, right? They're gone. It's over. You can't recompense them. You can't do anything. So I'm against the death penalty only because some innocents might die as a consequence. And I'm willing, but I don't, as an act of justice, I don't think it's an issue of justice. An issue of justice is if you take somebody's life, you deserve to die. Curious if you've ever seen Jesus of Nazareth, the 4-hour TV movie from the 70s with Robert Powell as Jesus. I'm not Christian, but it's so well made and well acted, I enjoyed it. No, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I'm very anti-Christianity, you might have noticed, so I don't know if I could tolerate it. My level of tolerance for religious generally is very, very low, and for Christianity, it's particularly low. And primarily because Christianity is the dominant religion in this culture that I live in. I also think Judaism is a little human friendlier, life friendlier. But I find it very difficult to watch movies or experience movies where the theme is Christian. Now, that's not true of painting. So there are a number of paintings, for example, of Jesus on a cross that I find quite moving. Because if you take out the Christianity and you view it as a hero sacrificed, then it's a great injustice, it's a great tragedy, and you can relate to that at that level. But once they start resurrecting him, you've lost me. I mean, I can appreciate a Caravaggio with Jesus being resurrected because it's a Caravaggio, and I appreciate the aesthetic quality of it, but it doesn't do anything to me emotionally. But Jesus on a cross, when it's well done, when it emphasizes his humanity rather than his godlike nature, is magnificent. And the same is true of religious music, masses, requiems. They can be magnificent because I abstract away the religion from them and think of a requiem as a mourning the death of somebody, of somebody you love, of somebody you respect, of somebody who's great. And a mass is just reverence for greatness, reverence for the grandeur of the world. All right. As per the issue of free will and consciousness, etc., you should watch Star Trek Next Generation episode Measure of a Man. All right, I'll do that. What is that? It's Next Generation. Okay. What differentiates occult and objectivism? Everything. Occult is mindless. Occult is unthinking. Occult is collectivist by nature. Occult is about following. Objectivism is about thinking. Objectivism is about choosing your own values, pursuing your own values. Objectivists don't indeed think alike. They don't dress alike. They don't chant alike. They don't sound alike. Objectivists, even when they agree, sound different. Because they have different concretes in which to base their agreement. They've integrated the principle that they agree on differently. So they'll explain it somewhat differently. They're not mouthing off just a set tune. Objectivism is connected to reality. Occult is connected to a mystical force, almost always. There's no cult of science. There's a cult of Hare Krishna or whatever. It's a cult of a mystical entity. There's no reason in a cult. There's no logic in a cult. There's no rationality in a cult. The cult is the negation of all of that. Right? So any kind of cult, by the very nature of being a cult, is the opposite of objectivism. What do you think about Michael Parenti's claims that socialism objectively worked to improve standard of living in USSR, Cuba, China, etc.? I don't know Michael Parenti's claims, and it's always dangerous to say somebody's wrong when you don't know his claims, but he's wrong. Because in reality, he's wrong, right? There is no claim that in the USSR, and certainly, if you compare what could have been, what should have been in these countries to what was, then, you know. So could you say that, I don't think this is true, right? But could you say that pre-Mao China, in the midst of civil war, was poorer and more horrible than Maoist China? Even that is a massive stretch. Because remember, Mao's Great Leap Forward involved the killing, basically, of 40 to 60 million people. I don't think the Civil War had 40 to 60 million casualties, right? But even if you could say it was somewhat better, right? Because, yeah, there was anarchy before. Communism might actually be better than anarchy, maybe. So what? It was immoral and awful and horrific before, and it's immoral and horrific during communism. You know, the alternative is freedom. The alternative isn't Tsarist Russia. The alternative isn't emperor-run China. The alternative isn't Batista's Cuba. The alternative is freedom. And that's what it needs to be compared to. All right. Cool. We're done. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the support. Thanks for sticking around for 2 hours. And hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you all. I think I'm doing the show tomorrow. So those of you who want to join us, we'll be here same time, same place tomorrow evening. Have a great rest of your week. Bye, everybody.